Hey there, I'm going to walk you through the steps of creating a form mule it's a Google Sheets extension. Now, full disclosure, form mule for some reason has been glitching on me this past few days, so I'm hoping it'll work for us today. So you start in the sheet that you want to create the form mule, and you're going to go to extensions and then form mule and then open. And hopefully it's going to work for us. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is choose the sheet that you're going to create this from. So for me, it's going to be form responses 1. And just so you know, if you look at the options here, this is the sheet tab that it's working on. You can see several others listed there. It's because I've been practicing this. And when you create a formula does a couple things automatically. One is it's going to create some working columns at the end of your spreadsheet. So you're going to kind of notice those at the far right of your spreadsheet at the end of your data. It's created some columns automatically. What it also does is create a sheet tab that it hides automatically. So there's some hidden sheet tabs in there as well. If you ever want to see those for whatever reason, you can go to view and then hidden sheets and they'll be there. So that's why I have so many here, but you only see form responses at the bottom. So I am going to link it to form responses. And then you're going to choose the trigger that you want the form mule to run. Now, I always use send on form submit just because that's always what I need it to do. So what that means is I'm going to set this up, and then anytime a user submits through the form mule is going to activate and do its thing and send out the appropriate emails to the appropriate people. If for some reason you want only the emails to go out at like 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock or something like that, then you can do a time trigger. But for my needs, I've always used the form trigger. So I'm going to turn that on. And then these options here, log a case number for each submission, that kind of will do like an auto number. It'll create an extra column that says case number, and it's just going to number them 1, 2, 3 as they come in. I actually have never used that option. I just know that that's what it does. Log the edit URL for each form submission. I use this a lot. So when you're going to want to use this is if you're creating like a workflow loop. So I use them for approval of systems a lot. If someone is needing, for example, a bus request, a teacher requests a bus and it goes to their supervisor to be approved, whether they can get a school bus for a field trip, then the approver will click a link I set up. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But they'll click that link and it takes them back to that exact form submission. And you have to have the edit URL for that. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. That will also create an extra column in your data. So by choosing that, Formula is going to create a column in your data. Then we're going to hit next. And here's where you select the number of templates. And depending on what you want it to do, I've had these templates, I think 5 is the most templates I've had for one formula. And that was for a behavior database for students. So I have one, in that scenario, one email template goes to the student. So they're notified when like a teacher has logged a behavior for them or a missing assignment. So the students get an email. Their parents get an email also if they've been logged a behavior incident or a missing assignment. And then I have just a couple more for specifics. If they receive like a major discipline referral, then the principal gets an email. So that's a different email template that just the principal gets. And so there are just some different scenarios. So kind of think about the paths that your emails are going to take and if the template needs to be different for each one. So the parents reads a little differently than say the principals would read, and then the students reads a little differently than the parent one reads. So in that scenario, I just create however many I need. And here's a little, I think it's a downfall of Formule. If you create, let's say you think, okay, I think I need 4. I think I need 4 templates. So it gives you places for 4 templates. And you're naming them, template 1. And I do recommend you renaming these here. So you might name this like student email. And this one might be parent email. And then you might have principal email. And then something else. You might just have, I also have actually a missing assignment email. And I do that differently because the teachers put in, their comments. So if it's a behavior issue, they actually say what the student did. And I don't always send that comment out to the parent or to the student. But if it's a missing assignment, they put missing assignment detail in there. And I do send that to the student. So if it's tagged missing assignment, then I'll send it on. But here is where I think the downfall is. Let's say that you think you're going to need 4 templates, but then the principal says, you know what? I don't really want the emails. I'm just going to look at the data. So I do not need an email. So there is no way to delete this third one, right? And I'm trying to share with you mistakes that I have made, because what I have done before is I think, well, okay, I'll go up here and I'll just change the number of templates back to 3. If you do that, it's going to delete this last template and it's going to leave this one. So once you create a template here, you can't delete ones in the middle or the top. It deletes from the bottom up, which is so inconvenient and so strange. So what I do if I'm am in that situation is I just make the send condition one that will never be met. Okay. And I'll kind of explain that in a minute when I'm talking about send conditions. So if you get in that situation where you think, okay, I need 4 or 5, but then for whatever reason they say, oh no, you know what? We don't want the parents to get an email, but you've already created the template for it. That exactly has happened to me before. Then I just came back into my formula, and the only thing I could do was make the send condition one that can never be met. Okay. So I'm giving you examples for a behavior database, but my sample sheet is a bus request. So I'm going to change this to the requester email, and then I have an approver email because they're going to get one also. And I use Autocrat to send to the bus garage once it's approved. I could have used Mule for that, and they would just get an email listing it, but they actually requested it be a Google Doc so they could print it and have it for their bus drivers. So in that scenario, I use this. I'm having Formula run some of the things, and I'm having Autocrat run some of the things. So just kind of an example of how these can all be used together. And it was just their preference to receive a document instead of an email. So the requester actually is going to get an email back once it's approved. So my send condition, if you click this arrow, every column heading you have across the top is available for here. So you just have to decide, okay, at what point in this form does the requester get an email back? And for me, they get an email back only when it's been approved. So I'm going to go down here to approved, and I'm going to choose not null. So what that means is that the cell is not empty. So they're going to get an email back whether the approve says yes or whether the approve says no. Okay. However, if I wanted it to be, they only get an email if it is approved. So if it's not approved, they never get an email, which I wouldn't do that because I think they need to know either way. But I could type in yes, the value. And then only when the approved column says actually yes, will they get an email. If you notice here, it says no quotation marks are needed because sometimes in Google Sheets, in order for it to read a value, you have to put quotes, but not in this scenario. It does it itself. I'm going to change this back to not null because anytime, like I said, the requester gets an email back whether it's approved or not. And then the approver they I'm going to choose the field submit. It's a question. It's the very first question in my form because if a teacher or coach is submitting a bus request for the very first time, my first question is, what are you doing in this form? Are you submitting or are you approving? Because it's the same form when the principals come back and loop around and approving. So I'll show you what that looks like. So, and this is also a really cool trick if you haven't ever used this. This is my original sheet. I'm going to go to Tools, Manage Form, and then Edit Form. Also, Go to Live Form is right there. That's one of the handiest little tricks ever. So this is my actual form that people use. And here's the very first question. So whoever is using this form chooses, are you submitting a new bus request or are you signing off? Are you an admin who's signing off on it? And remember, I use the live form URL that I'll tell you about in a moment. So most of the time, people are choosing submit a new bus request. So I'm going to use that for my criteria, submit a new bus request. So what that's going to do is whoever they choose as their supervisor, they're going to receive this approver email anytime the submit column says submit a new bus request. And then for these two that I messed up on, I actually could, because they're the two at the end, I'm going to go ahead and remove those from the template, but I will tell you how to create an unmatchable condition in case you ever mess up like I have done several times. I think the easiest one to use is timestamp. So if timestamp is null, okay, is one that won't ever be met if you're using a form submit, okay, because the timestamp is automatic. So anytime anybody submits a form, there's going to be something in the timestamp field. So putting send that whenever the timestamp is null will never happen. Okay. So again, if you mess up and you have a a template up here, that you've messed up on, like I described before, just make the timestamp as null because that won't ever happen. However, since these two are at the end, I can drop that down to 2 and see how it deletes the last two. So now I just have my 2 templates that I can build. And so you're going to save these template settings. And when you're deciding, what your send conditions are, they might be different for you. Just kind of think about how your form's going to run. And I've made every mistake I think you can with Form Mule, and you're going to find, oh, it did not need to send in. So you're going to change it. And also, what I do is I find myself a friend at work who there's a lady that works in the office beside me, and I'll tell her, I'll say, okay, I'm working on a new formula. You may get some emails that just ignore them because I'm testing them out on her. So I'll run over there and go, okay, what did this one look like? Did it look all right? So find yourself a friend that you can kind of bounce these off of. And I would say to just send them to yourself, but that gets super confusing, especially when you're working with like an approval system because you're not sure if it's working for the requester email that you just got or if it's working for the approver email. So if you've got a really complicated one, get a friend and make, okay, you're going to be my approver. Let's read this and make sure I did this. Okay. So I'm telling you, I've made every mistake you can make. I'm trying to give you some heads up on things that'll work for you. So next, you're going to edit your template. You're going to click next. And here is where Formula has been glitching on me. Oh, it worked. Okay. So we're going to build our requester email. So actually, I'm not. I'm going to build the approver first because this is actually the first email that sends out, right? This one sends on our timestamp because as soon as a teacher or coach submits a bus request, I want that request to go in an email to their supervisor that they've tagged so that it can get approved quickly. All right. So if you notice in this 2 column, you can here add to the approver. So in the form, they've chosen, who is your supervisor. And so that is tagged as an approver. All of your available merge tags are right here in this column, and you can scroll down to see all of them. So there's timestamp, there's email, there's the submit we use for our send condition. So all of them are down that column. And you can just choose whichever one. So if you wanted this to go to the approver always, you can do that. Sometimes I want to be CC'd on them just to make sure that they're working correctly. So you can use a merge tag for these emails, but if it's always going to the same person, you can just type in their email address. You don't have to do a merge tag. You can just type in exactly what you want. You notice the merge tags have the little chevron on each side, but it does it automatically. And then you remember that this is going to be an email sent out. So you're actually building the subject line, you're building the body. And then for the subject, I have needs approval, school bus request. So whoever this supervisor is, whether it's our athletic director or a principal of the school, they're going to get an email that says needs approval, school bus request. And also just to let you know, because I built the system under my name, the emails are going to come from, it says they're from me. Okay, but kind of everyone in our district knows when they get one of these that it's coming from a Mule. You can do a blind carbon copy if you want to. All of your basic email options are here. And then you're going to build the body of your email. So for the most part, I want the body to be like a conversational email for the approval. So I have requests made by first name. That's a tag in here, request by first name. And then I've actually put a space in there because if you don't put a space, as soon as that merge tag ends, it does exactly what you tell it to do. So if you don't tell it, you need to put a space in between the values of these merge tags. It's not going to put a space. So it would put the first name and the last name together. So you have to kind of be careful when you're building it like this to put the spaces in where they belong, which is also why I do several test runs before I run it for real. So you place your merge tag. So I've got first name, last name, has requested a bus to, and then I have the destination tag in here for the school or organization. And then I just conversationally put in the information. Okay. This formula here, I added it to my presentation, but this is really important because this makes the form edit URL a live link in the email. If you don't put this little coding here that I've included, this little A and the href equals, and then end it with A, it will not make it a live link. It will just be regular text and there's nowhere for them to click out. So please, if you're using the edit URL in a workflow loop where it has to go back to that form submission, to that exact line, you have to put this into your email. Now, this where I put click this link to respond to this request, that is editable. So if you need that to say something else, you can change only that text where I have there. You can replace it with, your verbiage that makes more sense to you in a scenario. But for me, I just want them to know, click here to go back to this request. So please don't forget to add that exact thing right there to your body of your email. And again, that makes that URL actually editable. And this form edit URL is one of those automatically created columns in your spreadsheet. So it's going to be found near the very end because that's where Mule adds them. So it is actually at the very end. So live form URL, you're going to scroll all the way down to grab that to add into your body. And then you just finish the email like you normally would. And then I like to save and preview. It's probably going to get, So I don't have any in this that are meeting this condition because I don't have any clean form submits, but I always like to do save and preview and it'll kind of give you what it's going to look like. Then when you're ready to actually, send them all for the first time. And again, I've got it set on a trigger, so I don't do this part very often. But you can come in here if you ever have to manually send one, and you can do save and send all. I'm going to go to the requester email and build that template. So on it, I have set it up a little bit differently. The email is basically the same. I have the response email address. So this is now going to go back to the teacher after it's been either approved or not by their supervisor. Just kind of let them know that it was received and their school bus request is in motion, right, to be approved, and so they'll have a bus for whatever they need it to. And then I started out with a little bit of conversational merge tags like I like to do, but then just in case, because coaches, for example, they might send, the entire season at one time. So I just like to give them a little bit of trip details so they'll know. And I also have a lot of times teachers who are requesting for field trips, they'll forget, did I say I was leaving at 8 or 8:30? So they always have this email to go back to what they actually requested for. Um, what I want to show you is that when you click a merge tag from the available column, it actually puts in what the exact merge tag is with a colon, and then it puts the merge tag. So when I'm listing information for them, I let it stay like that. But if I'm conversational, I delete this first part. So I'm going to do one so you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to press enter here like I'm adding something to this. So let's say I wanted them to have the number of students that they requested for. When I click number of students from the merge tag, it actually says the exact words, number of students and colon. So when this runs live, it's not going to have this part here, right? It's going to replace that with a number. So like maybe 12 or 50 or something. So number of students will appear with a colon and then 50. So if you're listing something, I will usually just leave this here because it just helps create your list of what is happening. However, if I'm conversational up here and I have received a response to your school bus request on whatever date, if I was putting here in a conversation, your request was for how many number of students, right? And I'm going to put a space and then I'm going to put students because I want it to say your request was for fill in the blank 50 students, right? So if I just click the merge tag and I do this, I always delete this lead in number of students or whatever it is, because if you don't, it's going to literally read what you see here. So it's going to say your request was for number of students colon 50 students. So that doesn't make sense in a conversational way. So I just go back in here and I backspace through that number of students. And so now it's going to read just like a beautiful personalized email. Okay. And it doesn't do anything. Don't ever mess with your merge tag. Okay. You have to leave it fully intact because that's how it makes that connection to retrieve that data. But the lead in that it puts in automatically, you can delete that. Okay, so that's pretty much how you set up your templates and set up your formula. And then, like I said, when you're ready, you can do a preview. And if you've got some already submitted that are for real and you actually need them to send out, you can go ahead and do save and send all, and it will send. Um, you can always send manually and not wait for your trigger. So if you did set a time trigger for like 3 o'clock, but then something happens, you're like, oh, this one needs to go out right now. I don't need to wait till 3. You can always come into Formule and you can send them manually. That is not a big deal. I do want to share one more thing with you because this happens quite a bit, actually, enough that I'm going to share it with you. So these are in the black heading. These are the automatically created column headings by Formule. So sometimes you might get an error over here, it happens mostly if an email is wrong or somebody, sends it to the wrong approver, they're like, I accidentally picked my principal and it was supposed to go to the athletic director, if they do sports and clubs or something like that. So they said it went to the wrong person for approval. So if you have an error, it'll be in red and it will say something like, undeliverable, email address incorrect, or something like that. Or you can always delete that error and then go in and manually resend your formula. Okay. Or if they do, like I said, they sent it to their principal and it was supposed to go to the athletic director, you can just come over to their exact line and you can, under the approver send status, you can just delete it. And then Formule, all it sees is a blank there. So it sees that it did not ever run. Okay. So once you delete it out of there, you can go back in and manually and it'll resend it. If I just went in to resend it and I had not deleted anything from this column, it's not going to find any row that needs to be sent. Okay, so that's why if it's an error, you need to delete it, or if it's a mistake, you need to delete it and then resend it. But I think that's gotcha on Formule. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. My email is in the presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. I love it, and I use it every day. Thanks.